Okay, welcome to our next reading of Akashic Enlightenment. So, we are going to be reading the prologue, Denying the Call to Answering the Call. The very earliest inklings of my calling and abilities were when I was a little girl and would experience deja vu quite frequently, including seeing a premonitory dreaming of things to come. Once I saw a small car accident my friend's mom was to have with me in the car, and sure enough, it happened. I also had a very real friendship with an invisible friend who I knew just too many details of for her to not exist on some plane, be it even unseen to the naked eye. I was also quite a sensitive child and would often get headaches with nausea, some to the point of vomiting, of which no one had an answer for back then, and a lot of allergies. In high school, amidst being drawn to dolphins and desiring to study dolphin intelligence, of which now I know is related to my Lemurian lifetimes, and also a fascination with higher forms of being and communication, I started digging into books on the paranormal. In the mornings, you could find me in the high school library digging through the Time Life book series, Mysteries of the Unknown. I still remember those books. So much fun. Full of stories and information on the paranormal and esoteric. Despite some of it freaking me out, I couldn't stop reading them even at night before going to bed. And next to my mother's fascination with, and thus my exposure to the X Files at the time, this seemed to fit right in. The door was definitely opening. During the summer between high school and college, the next quite accountable event was when my grandmother's life ended suddenly and her spirit visited me at my house. I didn't feel necessarily caught off guard and remember her telling me telepathically that she was fine where she was now, which, while supposed to be comforting, only made her actual passing from this realm almost harder to accept. This was a new experience and close to home this time. Her spirit hung around their house for a while, which I didn't share with my family and just allowed them their space to grieve and move on. I didn't feel comfortable to engage with her, but was sure of her presence and even went to visit her in the world of the dead in my shamanic training later in life, where we did actually have a brief but meaningful conversation. This was my training I did with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, and we did go ahead and visit the world of the dead. And I visited my grandmother and my grandfather and actually told my mom about the interaction, and she was really surprised at how I described it, saying that what I was describing, there's no way I would have known that they interacted that way. So it was proof to her that it really happened because how I described how they were interacting with each other. They were dancing and swaying each other. He swayed her, dipped her, which I never knew that they danced or any of that. So it was very powerful confirmation. So then in 1998, while I was completing my bachelor's degree at San Francisco State University, two things revealing my healer and shamanic calling occurred. First, I enrolled in a minor in their holistic health program and absolutely fell in love with Chinese medicine and the somewhat eccentric teacher we had teaching us, Angela Wu, who made it just all sound so absolutely magical and mystifying. I was so amazed with this class and classical Chinese medicine theory and their astrology based on the five elements that I almost went to her clinic to pursue it more. However, I just wasn't ready yet. The second revealing experience to occur while a student at SFSU in 1998 was on the paranormal end of the spectrum. Well, I participated in their study abroad program, taking me to Brunel University's design branch located in Egham, Surrey, England. I lived in a dorm that was a converted mansion, complete with gargoyles in the yard, and which was, of course, you guessed it, haunted. Upon my arrival, I clearly sensed the presence of one, if not more, ghosts, beings, entities, deceased souls. They didn't seem particularly threatening, but feeling their presence nonetheless was unwelcome. So upon moving in, I just said out loud that I had no interest in communicating with them and that this was to be my room for the duration of my stay, and I'd like them to leave and leave me alone. And so they did. However, Europe is an old place, and so visiting France during my time there brought more uncomfortable, unwelcome encounters. While staying at a pretty rundown and old youth hostel in Paris, I felt the presence of many deceased souls who were rather upset. Upon entering this place, it just felt like a haunted house, but being tired from traveling and in denial, I didn't bother to find another place. Later, that first night, sleeping there, I could see and feel numerous souls just circling around and around above the bed. I hated it and did what I could to ignore it, jamming my headphones on and playing Enya as loud as I could, while still trying to allow myself to fall asleep. It was no use. I clung to my boyfriend at the time, who was sound asleep. Come daylight, I had maybe dozed off a few hours in the early morning and was now ready to get out of there. After a quiet morning of packing up and leaving to go to breakfast, I asked my boyfriend if he'd felt the presence of anything when we were there. He was so relieved I said something, claiming he hadn't wanted to say anything as to not freak me out, but that place totally freaked him out, and he too had even felt other presences. We happily agreed to stay somewhere else and never went back. Unfortunately, the videotape taken of this place was lost somewhere amidst moving. Yeah, that was my time in Europe was. It's just an older place. You know, there's lots of deceased souls there. Um, Staying at the mansion at Brunel University was a lot easier. But yeah, that Paris and Paris in general, I really have no desire to go back after that incident. There's just so many um, souls that are on rest there. Yeah, and you know, other places in Europe, I've experienced that also in Denmark. Some of the older buildings where, you know, upsetting things have taken place, it's easy to pick up on it there. So I have much more better boundaries, much better boundaries now than I did when I was younger, visiting in 1998. Um, but yeah, it's still there. I'd rather not deal with it if I don't have to. So then in October of 2001, a month after 9/11 had occurred, a wake up call to many, I am sure, my calling began to present itself more clearly. I had just moved to Berkeley from San Francisco after having left my now flopped.com job from the dot-com bomb of 2001 and quitting my rather overnight successful electronic music disc jockey and producer career. Yes, it is true. I used to DJ and produce music in the underground music scene here in San Francisco Bay Area. I toured all over the US. It was a lot of fun. I was totally straight edge. I love the music, the traveling. It was fun. Threw some parties here in the SF Bay Area. Had kind of a whole little group. Used to design graphics for all the rave flyers and posters. I had a little partnered business with my partner at the time. It was a lot of fun. It was, you know, it's kind of being in the right place at the right time. And yeah, it was great to have that creative output. If you would like to listen to the music, my DJ name was Madam Mercury, and it's still all online. So I put all the mixes up if you want to check that out. So let's see, where were we here? So there was no longer a need to stay in the city with leftover skyrocketed rents and few jobs of interest. I was regrouping and taking time. Mhm. I was regrouping and taking time to reevaluate my life and life path when, of course, I unknowingly stumbled into a local bookstore that ended up introducing me to my shamanic lineage and healer calling, later revealing to be the roots of my strange paranormal encounters previously in my life. Lewin's Metaphysical Books on Ashby Avenue, now conveniently within walking distance of my new apartment, was a magical place full of walls and tables stacked high with books on anything metaphysical and esoteric. I find myself visiting the bookshop rather frequently due to so much free time trying to figure out what it was I really wanted to do with my life. At the time, I had no idea that this place was going to introduce me to and ignite my shamanic lineage roots and calling to be a healer. I would hang out there regularly and grab what books I felt called to, something this place seemed created for, a vortex perhaps. It was here that I met a very sweet 80-something-year-old man who worked at the register a few days a week. His name was Bud. He was such a sweetheart. He was very tall with a full beard with gray and white hair, kind eyes, and a hug you'd remember forever. He was clearly a soul who it was not my first time meeting. We would chat on occasion at the counter when I'd go to pay for my books, and one day he asked me if I was familiar with the Mayan calendar. I shared with him that I was not, and thus he decided to teach me. The next time I returned to the bookstore, he pulled out the bright yellow book with colorful artwork on the front cover and opened it up to show me these intricate shapes, Mayan glyphs, I later found out, and very detailed charts that coincided with them. The book he used was the Mayan calendar birthday book by Mary Fran Copa, along with some other photocopied pages from other knowledgeable texts on the subject. He explained how the symbols worked in the calendar and taught me how to do a basic Mayan calendar birth chart. It was fun, and I was intrigued with the accuracy of the descriptions of how it represented a person to be and what their path in this life was to be. Furthermore, it described the energy and path a year was to take, so as one could predict what future energies would be like. No wonder the Mayans had 2012 all mapped out. Yeah, they knew. They knew we were going to go through this awakening. I was grateful to learn this and experimented with friends and family who enjoyed having their birth date chart done. It just came so naturally to me. I now realize this was based on my past Mayan lifetimes. I was already trained and experienced in such work, which is part of my natural link to the Akashic Records now in this lifetime, as the Mayans were already using the Akashic Records since early times. Despite feeling excited with this work and doing good research and on alternative health schools, trainings, credentials, and certifications, I still couldn't decide or see how to move forward. I soon got distracted from my esoteric shamanic sprouting and alternative health search by allowing friends of my old life to pull me back into the music scene, and a year later, back to doing graphic design work that landed me in New York City. That is until my Saturn's return started pounding down my door in 2006. My destiny was not to be so easily denied. Yeah, that was living in New York was challenging, and I kind of wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. But at the same time, I feel like I was avoiding, really facing what I needed to face. I remember being there and kept talking about this naturopathic school in Oregon. And I knew that I was supposed to be over there doing that. And my Saturn's return finally kicked me into gear. And it was just kind of like a shock. So it was August of 2006, and I was living in a gross apartment compared to my California standards, and of course, Hell's Kitchen of New York City. It was here that I ironically had the height of my Saturn's return, being a sun and moon in Capricorn, and Saturn being Capricorn's ruling planet. It was quite intense and pulled to the surface my calling I'd been resisting following and committing to. At that time, I randomly bought books on Amazon about shamanism, and I knew I had a calling to help others. Previously, back in 2001, during my research, I had considered many alternative health schools like naturopathic medicine school, massage school, and holistic health, and was finally enrolled in a basic holistic health online class with Clayton College. For those of you who remember that somewhat illegitimate online institution, come fall that year, I had decided that if I was going to really do this life change to follow my calling, I first needed to get back to my roots on the West Coast. So that's kind of an example of, the soul really knowing what it needs to do and trying to find its way. And, I talk to a lot of people doing these readings for all of you. And there's sometimes you guys want like the straight answer of, am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to do that? And sometimes you're going to fumble your way. Well, it feels like fumbling. But you may try this class and then this class, but you're really feeling your way towards what it is you're really ultimately supposed to do. So this was in 2006. I didn't get the Akashic Enlightenment prayer until 2015. Right. And so there was a lot. And I feel like that has been kind of the biggest part of my soul's plan was to bring this forward for all of you. And there's a lot of other pieces that fit into that. But, when I meet people, the thing that they really want is that shamanic Akashic record reading and to learn Akashic Enlightenment. So all of these things kind of build together, studying the Mayan calendar so long ago, right? And it took me 15 years to have it kind of fully blossom, right? It just takes some time sometimes. So there I was in New York having this Saturn's return, buying these shamanic books, enrolled in this Clayton College holistic health program that was not accredited. And I knew it wasn't enough. And I knew I had to get back to the West Coast in order to do what I needed to do. So the first step was to move back to California. Jumping to a new state, to Oregon, where the naturopathic school was, felt like it was just too much at once. So I just got myself back to California to restabilize and then make that decision. So in October of 2006, I moved back to San Francisco, although Portland, which is where the school was close in the running for their amazing naturopathic school I'd had my eye on. NCNM, National College of Naturopathic Medicine, now called Natural University of Naturopathic Medicine. I felt I just needed to come back to my roots in San Francisco. So once resettled into San Francisco again and working at Netflix as a user interface designer and art director, which was such fun, amazing, and a well-paying job, I started having some health issues. I knew something was off, and despite the money and fun with such a great company, I felt empty inside and realized I had once again paused on pursuing my calling, and the wounded shaman was birthing due to this. So in 2007, I found a naturopath who started treating me, but who finally suggested I go get acupuncture. I went to a 5-element acupuncturist, and wow, I loved it and started feeling better right away and knew I had to pursue this. So that summer, I planned a trip to Portland to finally visit NCNM to check out their naturopathic program I'd originally felt drawn to. And once there, felt totally drawn to their natural medicine and their classical Chinese medicine program. I returned home elated, knowing I was finally going in the right direction. When I was visiting there, I went to I think it's the human body exhibit, where they have all their bodies that are preserved, and you can see all the muscles and the tendons. It's a whole exhibit, and it's extremely powerful. So here I was visiting this naturopathic school, and then I went to that exhibit, and I started crying. It was just such an emotional release of being called to connect to humanity on a much deeper level, and it really activated my calling. It was just a very pinnacle moment, and that exhibit is quite powerful. I think I also picked up on a lot of the energy that was left in the bodies, um, from the souls that were there. So the whole visit to Portland was extremely powerful. It was very, um, just a very important and pinnacle moment in the journey. So that same year, after getting back from Portland, that same year, I also saw a psychic, a coworker at Netflix had suggested. I saw her twice, once before my visit to NCNM in Portland and once after. She told me I was psychic and encouraged me to get some sort of psychic training, and also said, due to my bloodline, that I'd do best with the shamanic route. And if I felt drawn to Chinese medicine, to pursue that as well. So I started researching shamanism online and found a local practitioner who also practiced Reiki. I called her and said, I think I am a shaman and I don't know where to start. In doing some sessions with her, my abilities and calling were quickly revealed. This was clearly not my first lifetime doing this work. I was seeing what she was seeing and tapping into what she was doing, and more to the point that she asked me, how are you doing that? Of course, I had no answer to that question, as I was wondering that myself. All I knew was that it was clearly calling me. That was powerful activation, powerful time starting that training. It's like once I opened the door, the floodgates opened. So I did some Reiki and shamanism training with her, and this was my introduction to shamanism. I learned about power animals and shamanic journeying along with the Reiki training I received. It was an intense experience, partially cracking my third eye open at one point where I fell to the floor with so much energy and information coming in at once. It was a process to learn how to do this in a way that worked with my physical body, that my soul was so eager to throw into the deep end now that the doors were open and it could finally soar freely. At this time, I also enrolled into an introductory Chinese medicine class at ACTCM in San Francisco. After feeling so excited about that, I then enrolled in a weekend 5 element training at Acupuncture and Integrative Medicine College in Berkeley, which I also loved and felt so drawn to that I knew it was time to commit. So, January of 2008, I left Netflix due to health issues that, according to them, seemed to be calling for a required period of disability leave, and enrolled at Acupuncture and Integrative Medicine College in Berkeley and began my calling. So Netflix actually told me to take time off and to leave. And that's when I started the next path. I was actually just kind of dismissed. So, all in school, I overheard someone talking about their shamanic friend who was also an author and who wrote a book on shamanism and was having a book signing in San Francisco that weekend. I went, I loved it. I asked him about him and his wife's shamanic retreats down in South America. Feeling intimidated to go on such a trip with my health, which was still recovering a bit, his wife, also a shamanic practitioner and psychotherapist, suggested I check out the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, as their program was as close to what I'd experienced in a retreat in South America. After some research, I went to see a shamanic practitioner in the East Bay who had trained with the foundation and received shamanic healing and further guidance and confirmation for my path. I was feeling good and confident with it all. In 2009, while still attending acupuncture and integrative medicine college, I started my training with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. I took some introductory shamanism courses, learning basic divination journeying and how to retrieve power animals. It was so natural and I greatly enjoyed it. So in 2010, I took more intensive shamanic training and became a certified shamanic practitioner and shamanic journey counselor. I took I took to it all quickly and it felt very natural to me, as well as gave me a container to put my already existing psychic abilities into. My psychic and empathic abilities had previously had me more or less at their mercy for the greater part of my life, up until then, by me unintentionally taking on others' energy, which is what had led to some of the health problems I'd been having, as well as times telling people things they were clearly not aware of consciously. And my least favorite, as you already know, being contacted by upset or confused deceased souls. That last one used to paralyze me in fear until I got this proper shamanic training on how to use my abilities properly. Once trained, it was time to practice. Well, that shamanic training was intense, and I don't talk about this here, but they do this practice called the bound shaman. And they have us all sit in a pitch black dark room. We were at the Ions Institute in Petaluma, and I we all sat in a circle. We were in the dark, and they were drumming and chanting, calling in the spirits to untie the other teacher who was in the center of our circle, tied with ropes. She was bound, so she was curled up in a ball with the ropes tied around her. And the other shamanic teacher, they're both women. I can't remember their names right now. She did the drumming, called in the spirits. It felt like being in a crowded subway. I could feel all the spirits. And that was when I faced that worst fear of mine of feeling all the spirits being there. And it's so intense. And I could see these dark, shadowy figures. Even though it was dark, you could still kind of see these figures moving around her. And by the time they turned the lights on, the ropes were untied. So the spirits came and untied her. And that was when I really just met my greatest fear of feeling the presence of spirits being around me and learning that we can have a relationship with them. And just like we're with other people, right? We can ask them for help and then tell them no when we don't want to connect. And that was a huge breakthrough for me, was doing that training. It was so intense. Actually, when I got back home, I was moving. I moved to Mill Valley. And as soon as I moved in, I actually threw up. It was like my body was trying to adjust from everything. There were like so many spirits still connecting with me after doing the training and moving into this new place to live. It was like a whole new version of me was being reborn and coming into this reality. So it was really quite intense. And this was actually when I was on break. I took a leave of absence from acupuncture school because I was doubting it at a certain point. And this is because I was missing the deeper shamanic training that, I was really being called to. And once I did that, I was able to jump back into school. But, some of you may not know this. I applied to CIIS here in San Francisco to the psychology department, and I almost did somatic psychology. But once I applied and was accepted, I realized that no, that was not my calling. I needed to do the Asian medicine. I really love the plant medicine and the energy work with the meridians and the etheric body work with all of that. and the deep shamanic lineage that that practice has. And so I finished, I did that program instead of, I went back to into it instead of going the psychology route. And I just continued doing the shamanic training. So I practiced my own shamanic journeying, healing and divination work with friends, with some clients, and by joining a local drum circle while continuing my Asian medicine studies, which took the majority of my energy and gave me less time to practice. Yeah, acupuncture school is a full 4 year master's program, and you're learning Western medicine as well as Eastern medicine. So is very intensive. Had I known, I may have not done it, but no, I still would have done it. It was just a lot more intense than I had imagined it would be. It's a lot of knowledge, a lot of herbs, a lot of points, knowing the body. It's a medical school. And it's basically, I'm short, you're just short of a PhD when you leave there. I think they've changed the program since I left, and now you just add on a few more courses and it's a PhD. So it's very intensive, and it's a lot of valuable knowledge, life-changing knowledge. I absolutely love having Chinese medicine knowledge. I can't imagine my life without it. It is so monumentally helpful. I use it every day. So in 2014, while in my last year of Asian medicine school, I was introduced to the book A Course in Miracles, of which I did the guided lessons of and later worked on reading the text. For those not familiar with A Course in Miracles, it is a scribed text with lessons from Jesus aligning one with Christ consciousness and universal knowledge through its reading and proper assimilation and application of. I feel that reading it and doing the lessons brought my awareness to a higher level, a key, if you will, that further revealed and unlocked the doors to higher realms in my shamanic practice, which I was later to find out was exactly true. I did not know what I was getting into when I did A Course in Miracles. you know, Someone in my life was reading it, asked me if I wanted to try it out. I wasn't quite sure. There's a lot of Jesus talk in it. It sounded somewhat religious, but then I sensed the energy shift in this other person as they were doing the lessons over, a couple of weeks. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this because it felt like I needed to do it. Otherwise, things would come out of alignment, right? And so I started doing the lessons. I used the app on my phone, and then I got the audiobook and started listening to the audiobook. And I dove deeply into that in 2014. Finally, in 2015, yeah. So finally, in 2015, after completing my Master's of Science in Oriental Medicine, as my guides had instructed me to do, and more fully dedicating to my private practice, I dove deep into shamanic journeying. There were some upsetting events that occurred at the time, and our planet's energy was shifting more and more, which all drove me to journey regularly for clarity, a year of daily journeying to be specific. So a few things. I left acupuncture school. There's like a lot of exams, licensing exams, all of it. I was exhausted. It was just a very stressful, tumultuous period. Those who go through the program know it is absolutely exhausting to go through the program and to do all the licensing exams and all of that. And there were a lot of things going on, and I was just kind of questioning what was I supposed to be doing? And I really just had a bottoming out from it all. And that's when I turned to journeying every day. And my spirit guides taught me so much, including bringing me the Akashic Records. So, Course in Miracles really opened that up as well. So there was this layering of deep awakening that was occurring that I really did not know what I was getting into. I just kind of was going with it, and it had a plan of its own for me. It really did. So a year of daily shamanic journeying, and amidst getting clarity on events and guidance, the journey my spirit guides, teachers, and angels took me on was not expected, though clearly all planned out in my soul's higher plan and leading to Akashic Enlightenment. Yeah, so all of that really it got disorienting, and I did go back and see that psychic, and she told me, she's like, "You're already on this other path. Just keep following it." And so funny. I was just thinking about her today, and she doesn't even do readings anymore. She's just she's teaching a lot of astrology and psychic work, um, and I went with it, and now here we are. Right? You're listening to the book on my Patreon for all the classes and everything that I offer. So, yeah, the ride can definitely be bumpy, but it's definitely worth it. You don't want to not do it, right? And that's why I had shamanic journeying. Now I offer Akashic Enlightenment as a way to dive deep within and be that tool to guide you, right? As well as offering my services to help guide you. But it's really important to get that higher divine knowledge of enlightenment coming from the spirit world. You could say it's coming from your Holy Spirit column of light. It's what A Course in Miracles calls it, right? Or in Eastern practices, you're getting that higher knowledge through the higher transpersonal chakras, right? So it's all the same thing, right? Just different stories or ways to connect with it or access it, which is what we'll be doing further along in this book. So I hope you're enjoying this so far. And this will be the end of the prologue, and I will see you at the next chapter.